Hey, good morning, guys. It is October 13th. Sorry, I have missed a few days. I will try to get back and do this. I'm just not sure. Life's been a little crazy. Um, Chambers is in Exodus. Sorry, not in October. Chambers is in Exodus 2. It's the story of Moses, and when Moses not starts his calling or his ministry, but when Moses begins his recognition of what God's calling is, and he's a little premature. I don't know. It's funny because we talked about this last night in Yabs. This idea that God's timing sometimes is what confuses us, and we take, like, for healing in particular, and we take it, we misunderstand God's timing for God's answer. God saying no, or God not hearing our prayers, but really his timing's just different. And so Moses here jumps the gun as he recognizes, and he grows up, he recognizes the fact that he's a Hebrew, and he identifies with these Hebrew slaves, and he finds himself in a position where he steps in, kills an Egyptian slave master in Exodus 2, and he's not, it doesn't catapult, or it doesn't launch this deliverer of Israel phase in his life. Instead, he goes to the wilderness for 40 years. And that's what Chambers is kind of keying out on here. Moses sees or recognizes the fact that God has called him to deliver the people, but his timing and his, maybe even his perspective is wrong. And if you're familiar with the story, it's interesting that he does recognize the fact that he's Hebrew. He sees as he grows up, I'm different. Maybe even his, I know his, his birth mother, his true mother, nursed him when he was a baby. And so I'm sure she whispered things in his ear. And his sister was present at one point. I'm not sure how present they were throughout his childhood. But obviously he was raised as an adopted son in Pharaoh's family, but he was always aware of the fact that he was a Hebrew. So he jumps the gun. He thinks, oh, I'm going to deliver them. And that's not the plan. That's not God's plan. That's not God's timing. Well, it is God's plan, not God's timing. Chambers says this, and he talks about how when we kind of operate in our own plans and designs, sometimes that's not God's designs, and he has to bring us to this point of walking with him, communing with him, before we can accomplish the plans that he's set before, even if we see them, even if we recognize the plan he set before us. Chambers says a little ways down here in the first paragraph, in the beginning, Moses realized that he was the man to deliver the people, but he had to be trained and disciplined by God first. It's interesting, too, what the discipline is. To be taken from an adopted son of Pharaoh to be now a shepherd in the wilderness among nomads, and the humbling that God had to do. Discipline came with humbling, and you could say humiliation, but they're kind of the same root. He had to be trained and disciplined. He was right in the individual aspect that he was the deliverer, but he was not the man for the work until he had learned communion with God. And so I think that's sometimes, and it's sometimes a little disheartening for people when they jump into something and they think, God has called me, and they're new believers, they're young believers, God has called me to this great ministry. Yep, he probably has, and many times he goes ahead and he plants that seed in your heart. But the truth is, you need to be, sometimes we need to be humiliated or disciplined, or both, first, before we can accomplish that plan that he's planted, the seed that he's planted in our hearts. Chambers says here, we have to learn, a little further down, we have to learn that our individual effort for God is an impertinence. our individual effort is an impertinence. When we think, oh, yes, got it, thanks, God, I'll run with it from here. I've got it from here. Our individuality is to be rendered incandescent by a personal relationship to God. Um, we we give up our individuality, and the fact that this is, oh yes, God, I'm going to take your plan and own it. And that's not what God has for us. His plan is always accomplished through cooperation with him, not with us um, being endowed with some great purpose, and now we take it and run with it. That's just not the way God works. So anyway, ponder Moses and the 40 years when you think, wow, what is God waiting for? You guys have an awesome day.